I was 22 years old, standing in our cramped kitchen with my acceptance letter trembling in my hands, when my mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "You can't handle college alone. You'll fail just like you fail at everything else." The words hit me like a slap. My younger brother Jason sat at the table, smirking into his cereal bowl. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. It was like she'd just commented on the weather, not shattered her daughter's dreams into a million pieces. "Mom, I got a full scholarship," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Full ride to State University." "They want me?" She laughed. Actually laughed. "They want your sob story, sweetie. Poor girl from a broken neighborhood. You're just a charity case to make them look good." She turned back to the stove, dismissing me like I was nothing. "Besides, who's going to take care of me? Your father? Your useless brother?" I looked at Dad. He finally glanced up, shrugged, and went back to his sports section. Jason grinned wider. "Yeah, sis. You can barely make toast without burning it. College? That's hilarious." That was the moment I realized my own family wanted me to stay small, to stay trapped in this house, in this life, forever. "I'm going," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm accepting the scholarship." My mother spun around, her face twisted with rage. "Then don't come crying back here when you flunk out in the first semester. You're on your own." But here's what she didn't know, what none of them knew. I'd been planning my escape for 3 years, and this scholarship was just the beginning. I moved into my dorm room 3 weeks later with everything I owned stuffed into 2 garbage bags and a backpack. My roommate, Sarah, took one look at me and asked, "Rough family situation?" "You could say that," I muttered, unpacking my few belongings. She nodded like she understood, but how could she? Her parents had just left after decorating her entire side of the room, crying happy tears, taking a million photos. My phone had 0 messages, 0 calls, nothing. The first month was brutal. I worked 2 jobs while taking 18 credit hours. I served coffee at 5 a.m., went to classes until 3 p.m., then worked at the campus library until midnight. I lived on ramen and vending machine snacks. My hands were constantly shaking from exhaustion and too much caffeine. "You look like death," Sarah said one night, finding me crying over my biology textbook at 2 a.m. "When's the last time you slept?" "Sleep is for people whose families believe in them," I said, wiping my eyes angrily. But I kept going. Every time I wanted to quit, I heard my mother's voice. "You'll fail just like you fail at everything else." And something fierce inside me screamed no. By the end of first semester, I had a 3.8 GPA. I called home once to share the news. My brother answered, "Mom says she doesn't want to hear from you unless you're coming home to apologize." I hung up without saying a word. Second semester, I pushed harder. I joined study groups, went to every office hour, made friends with my professors. I discovered I had a gift for chemistry. My professor, Dr. Martinez, pulled me aside after class one day. "You're exceptional. Have you considered research?" "I'm just trying to survive," I admitted. She looked at me for a long moment. "Surviving isn't enough. You deserve to thrive." Those words changed everything. But I had no idea that back home, something was happening that would bring my family crashing back into my life. It was the middle of my sophomore year when my phone rang at 3 a.m. I almost didn't answer. Unknown number. But something made me pick up. "Is this Emma?" A woman's voice, cold and professional. "Yes, this is Mercy General Hospital. Your father had a heart attack. Your mother listed you as emergency contact." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. "Is he okay?" "He's stable. But you should come." I drove 4 hours through the night with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. When I walked into that hospital room, my mother was there, her eyes red and swollen. Jason sat in the corner, looking smaller than I remembered. The moment she saw me, my mother's face transformed. The grief disappeared, replaced by something ugly, something cruel. "Well, look who decided to show up," she spat. "Miss College Girl, too good for her family but comes running when there's drama." "Mom, I came because Dad. Your father wouldn't be in this hospital if you hadn't abandoned us." Her voice echoed through the room. A nurse poked her head in, concerned. He worked himself to death trying to cover the bills you left behind. Your share of the rent, the groceries, everything. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. What? You kicked me out. You said I was on my own. Jason finally spoke up, and I barely recognized the venom in his voice. Yeah, but you still owe us. Family takes care of family. Or did your fancy scholarship make you forget where you came from? My father lay there, tubes and wires everywhere, and said nothing. Just like always. I want you to drop out, my mother said, crossing her arms. Come home. Get a real job. Help us like you should have from the beginning. The hospital room suddenly felt suffocating. You're joking, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Dad just had a heart attack and you're using this to manipulate me into dropping out? My mother stepped closer, her finger jabbing toward my face. Manipulate? Manipulate? You selfish little brat. This is about responsibility. This is about family loyalty, something you clearly know nothing about. A small crowd had gathered outside the room. 2 nurses, a doctor, an elderly patient in a wheelchair. They were all watching through the glass, watching my mother tear me apart in front of everyone. She abandoned us when we needed her most, my mother announced loudly, making sure everyone could hear. Got herself a fancy scholarship and forgot about the people who raised her, fed her, kept a roof over her ungrateful head for 18 years. Mom, please, I begged, tears streaming down my face. You told me not to come back. You said I was on my own. Because I thought you'd prove me wrong, she screamed. I thought you'd realize family comes first and come crawling back. But no, you stayed away, playing student while your father worked himself into this hospital bed. Jason stood up, and for a moment I hoped he'd defend me. Maybe he'd tell the truth. Maybe he'd be my brother for once. Instead, he looked at the crowd and said, She hasn't sent a single dollar home, not one. My dad's in here because he had to work double shifts to cover her share. The judgment in those strangers' eyes was unbearable. An older nurse shook her head in disgust. The patient in the wheelchair muttered something about kids these days. I stood there, public humiliation washing over me like acid, and not a single person asked for my side of the story. Not one person defended me. I was completely, utterly alone. I ran from that hospital room, my vision blurred with tears, and collapsed on a bench in the parking lot. The cold night air bit at my skin, but I barely felt it. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. You have 48 hours to withdraw from school. Or don't bother coming to your father's funeral when the time comes. I stared at those words until they blurred together. She was threatening to erase me from the family completely. To make sure I'd never see my father again, alive or dead. Around 5 a.m., a security guard walked past. You okay, miss? Been out here a while? I'm fine, I lied, my voice hollow. He nodded but didn't leave. Family trouble? I laughed bitterly. Something like that. Can't choose your family, he said, then walked away into the darkness. I sat there as the sun came up, completely numb. Every horrible thing my mother had ever said played on repeat in my head. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I had abandoned them. My phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Maybe it was the hospital. Maybe Dad was worse. Emma? A male voice, older, unfamiliar. Yes? This is Robert Chen. I'm your father's older brother. Your uncle. I froze. I didn't know my father had a brother. That's because your mother made sure of it, he said, his voice heavy. I've been trying to reach you for 2 years, ever since you left for college. Your father finally gave me your number tonight when your mother stepped out of the room. The walls I'd built around my heart started to crack. Why? I whispered. Why now? Because I need to tell you the truth about your family, he said. And trust me, it's nothing like what your mother's been telling you. I met Uncle Robert at a diner 2 blocks from the hospital. He was tall, gray-haired, with kind eyes that looked exactly like my father's used to, before life drained all the warmth from them. You look just like your grandmother, he said softly as I slid into the booth across from him. She would have been so proud of you. My grandmother? I'd never heard anyone mention her. My mother said both my dad's parents died before I was born. Your grandfather did. Your grandmother died 3 years ago. He pulled out his phone and showed me photos. An elderly Asian woman with my smile, standing in front of a beautiful house, holding a college diploma. She was a chemistry professor. Left everything to your father in her will, including a trust fund specifically for your education. My blood ran cold. What? $250,000, Robert said, his jaw tight. Your grandmother set it up the day you were born. It was supposed to be released when you turned 18 or enrolled in college. The diner suddenly felt like it was spinning. But I got a scholarship. I worked 2 jobs. I have student loans for living expenses. Emma. Robert's voice was gentle but firm. Your mother intercepted that money. She's been controlling your father's finances for years. When the trust administrator tried to contact you, your mother told them you'd declined college and weren't interested. That's impossible, I shouted, and everyone in the diner turned to stare. I lowered my voice, shaking. She kicked me out. She told me I'd fail. She wanted me to stay home and take care of her. Exactly, Robert said. Because if you went to college, you'd find out about the money. You'd become independent. You'd escape her control. A waitress came over. Everything okay here? We're fine, Robert said, never breaking eye contact with me. I felt sick. My father knows about this? Robert's silence was answer enough. Your father's been trapped for 25 years, Robert said quietly. She isolated him from our entire family when they got married. Told him we disapproved of her, that we were elitist, cruel. None of it was true. But the heart attack, I said, my voice breaking. She said he worked himself to death because I left. Your father had a heart attack because your mother's been draining his accounts for years, Robert interrupted. Gambling debts. Shopping addictions. She's been bleeding him dry while making him work overtime to hide it. I couldn't process this. My whole life had been a lie. I have proof, Robert continued, sliding a folder across the table. Bank statements. The trust documents. Emails from the administrator. And something else. He pulled out his phone and pressed play on a video. It was my mother, sitting in a lawyer's office, from what looked like a security camera. The date stamp showed 3 years ago, right after I'd graduated high school. Her voice was crystal clear. I don't care what her grandmother wanted. That money should compensate me for 18 years of raising someone else's mistake. Emma was never supposed to exist. I can't let her have this and leave me with nothing. I felt my entire world shatter into a million pieces. Someone else's mistake? I whispered. Robert's eyes filled with tears. Your father isn't your biological father, Emma. Your mother had an affair. But your dad, my brother, he chose to raise you anyway. He loved you. He still does. But she's been using that secret as blackmail for years. The diner door opened. I looked up. My mother walked in, her face white with rage. Behind her, Jason held his phone up, smirking. Told you she was meeting someone, Mom? You! My mother snarled, pointing at Robert. You have no right. Actually, a voice said from behind her. He has every right. A woman in a sharp suit stepped forward, pulling out a badge. Special Agent Lisa Morrison, Financial Crimes Division, the woman said, her badge glinting under the diner's fluorescent lights. Mrs. Patterson, we've been investigating you for the past 6 months. My mother's face went from red to white in seconds. I don't know what you're talking about. Embezzlement of trust funds. Identity fraud and financial elder abuse. Agent Morrison continued calmly, as every person in the diner stopped eating to watch. Mr. Chen filed a complaint when he discovered you'd been fraudulently accessing his mother's estate and stealing funds designated for your daughter's education. That money was mine, my mother screamed, her composure completely shattered. I raised that girl. I fed her, clothed her, put up with her for 18 years. That trust fund was compensation for my suffering. Jason backed toward the door, his smirk finally gone. Mom, maybe we should— Shut up, Jason, she snapped. This is all your sister's fault. If she'd just stayed home like she was supposed to, none of this would have happened. Agent Morrison gestured to two officers I hadn't noticed by the entrance. They moved toward my mother. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." "No!" My mother's voice reached a pitch I'd never heard before. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Tell them, Emma. Tell them you don't want to press charges. I'm your mother. Tell them this is a misunderstanding." I looked into her eyes and saw nothing but desperation. No love, no remorse, just panic at being caught. "Let go of me," I said quietly. "Emma, please!" She was crying now, mascara running down her face, making a scene for everyone to see. "I did everything for you. Everything. You can't let them take me!" "What about your father? What about Jason? We're your family." "You told me I couldn't handle college alone," I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "You said I'd fail at everything. You made me believe I was worthless, that I owed you my entire life. But you were wrong." The officers moved her hands off my arm. She struggled against them, screaming, "You ungrateful little bitch! I should have gotten rid of you when I had the chance. You were a mistake. A mistake!" The entire diner heard her say it. Every single person witnessed her true face. Jason stood frozen by the door, his phone still in his hand, finally understanding that his mother had just destroyed everything. One of the officers turned to him. "Mr. Patterson, we're going to need you to come down to the station as well. We have questions about your involvement." I didn't know," he stammered, but his eyes said otherwise. As they led my mother out in handcuffs, she turned back one last time, her face twisted with hatred. "You'll regret this. You'll have nothing. Nothing." But she was wrong about that too. Uncle Robert stood up, put his hand on my shoulder. "Your grandmother's trust fund is still yours, Emma. All of it. Plus the money your mother stole can be recovered. You're free now." Agent Morrison handed me her card. "We'll need your testimony, but Mr. Chen's documentation was thorough. Your mother won't be able to hurt you anymore." I watched through the diner window as the police car drove away, my mother's face pressed against the glass, still screaming words I couldn't hear anymore. A waitress brought me coffee. "On the house, honey. You okay? Was I okay?" I'd just watched my mother get arrested. Learned my entire childhood was built on lies and manipulation. Discovered I had a family I never knew existed, and a grandmother who'd loved me enough to plan for my future. "I will be," I whispered. But this wasn't over yet. Because when I returned to the hospital to see my father, I was about to discover one more secret that would change everything. I walked back into that hospital room with Uncle Robert beside me, my legs shaking with every step. My father was awake now, sitting up slightly, the color returning to his face. When he saw me, something in his expression broke. "Emma," he whispered and started crying. I'd never seen my father cry. Not once in 22 years. "Mr. Patterson," Uncle Robert said firmly, "it's time you told her everything. No more secrets. No more letting that woman control the narrative." My father nodded, wiping his eyes with trembling hands. "Sit down, sweetheart. Please." I sat, my heart hammering in my chest. "Your mother told you I was your father," he began, his voice weak but determined. "And in every way that matters, I am. But biologically, you're right. I'm not." "I know," I said softly. "Uncle Robert told me." He looked surprised, then relieved. "Good. That's good. I wanted to tell you so many times, Emma. So many times. But she threatened that if I ever did, she'd take you and Jason away. Make sure I never saw either of you again. Back then, I believed her. I was young, stupid, and terrified of losing you. Who is my biological father?" The question came out smaller than I intended. My father, because he was my father, blood or not, took a deep breath. His name was David Chen. He was Robert's son, my nephew. Your mother had an affair with him while we were separated for a few months early in our marriage. Uncle Robert's face was heavy with old grief. David died in a car accident 2 months before you were born. He never knew about you. When your mother discovered she was pregnant, she reconciled with your father here and told him the baby was his. He chose to believe her because he wanted to save the marriage. But my mother, your wife, my father continued, she knew the truth. And when my mother, your grandmother, figured it out, because you looked so much like David as you grew older, that's when everything changed. I felt dizzy. What do you mean? Your grandmother came to me 5 years ago with proof. DNA tests she'd secretly run when you were visiting her. She showed me that you were David's daughter, which meant you were her biological granddaughter after all, just through a different path. His voice cracked. She was overjoyed, Emma. She'd lost her son but gained you. She set up that trust fund because you were David's legacy. Her legacy? And Mom found out? Your mother intercepted a letter from the lawyer, Uncle Robert said. That's when she cut off all contact between you and your grandmother. Told you she'd died. Told my mother that you wanted nothing to do with her. She kept you apart deliberately. I felt tears streaming down my face. I could have known her. I could have had a grandmother who loved me. She wrote you letters, Robert said, pulling out a stack of envelopes from his jacket. Every month for 3 years until she died. Your mother returned them all marked refused, but I kept them. Every single one! I took the stack with shaking hands. Dozens of letters, all addressed to me, all returned unopened. There's more, my father said, and something in his voice made me look up. When your mother was arrested tonight, the police searched our house. They found documents, Emma, forged documents she'd been preparing. What kind of documents? She was planning to have you declared mentally incompetent, he said, his voice breaking. She'd been building a case with a corrupt psychiatrist, claiming you were having a breakdown at college. She was going to have herself appointed as your legal guardian and conservator, which would give her complete control over your grandmother's trust fund. My blood ran cold. That's why she wanted me to drop out. She needed you back home, isolated, where she could control the narrative, Robert confirmed. The psychiatrist she hired was arrested tonight, too. He'd been doing this to other young people, helping their parents steal from them. I couldn't breathe. The full scope of her manipulation was suffocating. I'm so sorry, Emma, my father sobbed. I was weak. I let her control everything. I let her hurt you. I worked those extra shifts not because we needed the money, but because I couldn't stand being home. Couldn't stand watching what she was doing to you and not having the courage to stop it. The heart attack wasn't from overwork, Uncle Robert said gently. Tell her the truth. My father looked at me with devastated eyes. It was a suicide attempt, Emma. I took pills. I couldn't live with myself anymore. But apparently I couldn't even do that right. The room spun. My father had tried to kill himself rather than stand up to my mother. But when I woke up here and Robert found me, told me he'd been investigating everything, that he was going to stop her, he reached for my hand. I realized I'd been given a second chance, a chance to finally be the father you deserved, to finally tell the truth. A nurse knocked softly. I'm sorry, but we have someone else here to see Emma Patterson. She says it's urgent. A Dr. Martinez from State University, my chemistry professor here? Dr. Martinez walked in, her face serious but warm. Emma, I'm sorry to intrude, but when you didn't show up for your exam this morning and didn't answer your phone, I got worried. I called campus police, tracked your emergency contact, and learned about all of this. I'm sorry, I started. I completely forgot about the exam. That's not why I'm here, she interrupted gently. She pulled out an envelope. This arrived for you yesterday. I thought it could wait until after your exam, but given everything, I think you need to see it now. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. It was from the National Science Foundation. Dear Ms. Patterson, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as one of 10 recipients nationwide for the prestigious Chen Memorial Research Fellowship. The Chen Memorial Fellowship. Named after David Chen, my biological father, my grandmother hadn't just left me money. She'd endowed an entire research fellowship in her son's name. And I'd won it. Full funding for graduate school, Dr. Martinez said softly. Stipend, research budget, everything. You're going to be a scientist, Emma, just like your grandmother. I looked around that hospital room at the family I never knew I had and the future my grandmother had built for me, brick by brick, even after death. And I finally understood. I was never alone. I was never a mistake. I was loved in ways I'd never even imagined. 2 years later, I stood on a stage in a cap and gown, graduating top of my class with a degree in chemistry. Summa cum laude. The auditorium was packed, but I only saw the faces that mattered. Uncle Robert in the front row, holding a framed photo of my grandmother and my biological father. My dad, the man who chose to be my father, sitting beside him, healthy now, divorced, finally free. Dr. Martinez, beaming with pride. And in my hands, I held all those unopened letters from my grandmother. I'd read every single one. She'd written about her career, her research, her dreams for me. In the last letter written a week before she died, she wrote, "Emma, even if you never read this, know that you were loved. You were wanted. You were never a mistake. You are my legacy, and I know you'll do extraordinary things." My mother was in prison. Jason had cut ties with her, started therapy, reached out to apologize. I hadn't responded yet. Maybe someday. As they called my name, I walked across that stage and accepted my diploma. The Chen Memorial Fellowship had funded my research on cancer treatments. I'd already been accepted to 3 top graduate programs. "You were wrong, Mom," I whispered to the empty seat I'd left in the back row, the one I'd reserved in her name as a reminder. I didn't just handle college alone. I conquered it. The crowd stood applauding. I smiled, thinking of my grandmother watching from somewhere beyond. I'd graduated top of my class, and this was only the beginning.